Hey everybody, so today we're going to be making skinny chicken enchiladas. This is a recipe that we've gotten off of skinnytaste.com, and I've tweaked it a little bit, but the recipe is more or less accurate to what we're doing today. It's a chicken enchilada wrapped in a whole wheat or reduced carb flour tortilla, and it's got a scratch-made sauce baked in the oven. Pretty straightforward. We're doing it from frozen chicken breast, and my tortillas happen to be frozen as well, so we're going to thaw those along the way. And the recipe, there'll be a link in the description below, but it's off of Skinny Taste. So we're going to start with assembling the sauce. Now, this recipe calls for separate sauce from the chicken mixture. The challenge with that is you need to make two separate sauces, and that's a lot of extra work. And really, the only difference between the two is the inclusion of chicken and a variance on a couple of the spices. So I'm actually going to make one big batch of sauce that's kind of halfway in between the two, and then pull some out to reserve to top the enchiladas with, and then I'll toss the chicken in it. So I'm not going to make two sauces, even though this recipe calls for two separate sauces. So I'm just going to combine the quantities and get one sauce going. Now, while that's going away and then the sauce is prepping, I'm just going to toss my chicken breasts frozen into the oven at about 400 degrees. I'm going to put them in the oven as soon as I start it. I'm not going to wait for the oven to come up to temp, and they're just going to be salt and peppered. So really straightforward. We're not too concerned if they're overcooked. Certainly don't want them undercooked, but we're going to cook them straight through, and I've got a technique for shredding them. Okay, so this recipe calls for 2 chicken breasts. I had a third frozen one, so I'm going to throw all 3 in, and I'll just leave the other one in the fridge. We'll feed it to Riley as we go, because she probably won't be eating this. So the 3 frozen chicken breasts are going to go into a 400-degree oven. I've just turned it on. You can see it's preheating, and we're just going to toss it in there, and by the time the sauce is done and everything's thawed, we should be ready to start assembling the sauce with the chicken. It should be cooked by then. So we're going to start opening some cans, and we'll get the sauce going. I've got my Dutch oven. You can use a regular sauce pot, and you're just going to have this at about medium. So as soon as your pot's at about medium or so, we're going to get your onion into the pot to start cooking the onion. The recipe calls for the chicken recipe to have 1 cup of onion, and the sauce recipe does not call for any onion. In this case, I'm using a sweet onion, and sweet onions obviously aren't quite as pungent as a regular onion, whether it be white or yellow, and they're also larger. So I have almost 2 cups worth of onion here, but I'm going to toss it in the pot, and it's going to be for both sauces combined, so the quantity is going to be fine. So we're going to get this in the pot, and then we'll start chopping up our garlic. So our onions are starting to get just a little bit of color here, so we're going to toss in our chopped garlic. This is about 4 cloves of garlic, and then once this garlic's cooked in a little bit, we're going to add in our dry spices, and we'll start tossing in our wet ingredients. Okay, so between the 2 sauces, we're looking for chipotle chili powder, cumin, chicken broth, and tomato sauce. And the tomato sauce for the sauce portion is 1.5 cups, and the tomato sauce for the chicken portion is 1/2 cup. But in addition to that, as far as liquids, we've also got 3/4 cup of chicken broth for the sauce, and 1/3 cup of chicken broth for the chicken. So in total, I'm going to have 2 cups of tomato sauce and about a full cup's worth of chicken broth. So we're going to get all of that into the pot, and for spices, I won't be using chili powder because Kayla's going to eat this, but instead, so that we get some of the smoked flavor, we're going to use smoked paprika and paprika to give us a little bit of that taste, and I'm going to use a little bit of chili powder, but I certainly won't be using any chipotle chili powder or anything with significant amount of heat. And we're just going to have to add that ourselves after the fact with a chili sauce or a salsa. Alright, so in goes the cumin. We're going to end up with about 1/2 tablespoon's worth. I like to use more seasoning or dry seasoning than called for in the recipe. I add it before the wet ingredients go in, so it has an opportunity to develop a little bit of flavor. Same thing with the smoked paprika. And regular paprika. We're also going to add a little bit of salt and pepper now, although we'll be seasoning at the end, you know, you're not going to use a lot of salt and pepper at this point. So I like to use Better Than Bouillon for my chicken bouillon or my chicken stock. It's a concentrated paste. This happens to be a low sodium or a low salt version, and I use this because it keeps well in the fridge. It's a significantly larger quantity, and you're able to control the amount of liquid that goes into it. So I can make a thicker or a heavier or more tasty stock rather than something watery coming out of a Tetra Pak. Totally your preference. We're looking for a cup, and for a cup is approximately a tablespoon worth of bouillon paste. Okay, so the bouillon paste is in there, and you can see we've got lots of caramelized goodness down on the bottom. So we're now going to add our water to deglaze a little bit on the bottom of the pot, and then we're going to add in our tomato sauce. Okay, so we've got our tomato sauce in there now. I forgot to add our oregano, so I'm going to put my oregano in. And this recipe calls for fresh cilantro. Now, I don't have any cilantro on hand, so I won't be able to garnish with it or put it in the sauce, but coriander has a very similar flavor profile to cilantro, so I'm going to put some coriander in. It's your preference. Okay, so chicken's out of the oven, sauce has been simmering and everything's well cooked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these chicken breasts and I'm going to pop them into this bowl, and I'm going to use a potato masher to shred the chicken, and I find this works really well. Okay, so the chicken is shredded, and I'm going to pull about 2 cups of tomato sauce out, and that's going to go on top of the enchiladas after they're rolled, and then I'm going to mix the chicken into the remaining sauce. Okay, so we've got our chicken mixed in with the tomato sauce, we've got our tomato sauce, I've got my tortillas and some cheese to top. What we're going to do is we're going to lay a little bit of tomato sauce down on the bottom. We're going to use in this case, I'm using a 10-inch tortilla, so I'm going to use about 1/3 of a cup. With a 7 or 8-inch tortilla, you use about 1/4 cup of filling per tortilla. Roll it up, seam side down, into the casserole dish. Whole casserole dish full of tortillas. We then top with the remaining sauce, and then on goes the cheese and into the oven. Pretty straightforward, but it's a little bit labor intensive, so I'll try and get a couple quick shots here as we go. Okay, so not a lot of sauce in the bottom, but what you're going to do is you're going to shake it, and the sauce will disperse, and you'll get just a nice little bit of sauce on the bottom of the baking dish, not too much. This is going to help when the tortillas go in seam side down to kind of soften up the tortillas and then bake them so that they hold together a little bit. Okay, so this is what about 1/3 of a cup looks like inside a 10-inch tortilla. Okay, so there we go. Now I opted to use my 3rd chicken breast after all, so I've essentially got 1.5 times the recipe. So if you were using 7 or 8-inch tortillas, or you're using 10-inch tortillas, 1 portion of recipe would fit in a 9x9, which would be these 6. And then I've got these 2 leftovers, and this one's got a little bit extra stuffing in it. So fairly well portioned out. We've got very, very little left. So I'm now going to throw a little bit of sauce on top and a little bit of cheese, and I'll throw it back into my 400-degree oven for about 20 minutes. Okay, so the sauce is on. I'm now going to place my cheese on top of the sauce. You want to make sure you try and get the ends covered. You don't want them to dry out when it's in the oven. Now, this recipe calls for Mexican cheese. You can use any variety of cheese mix that you like. In my case, I'm using a low-fat cheddar, and I've mixed in a little bit of taco seasoning to give it a bit more of a Mexican cheese type flavor. But this is just straight low-fat cheddar. So I'm going to sprinkle my 1.5 cups on top of here, since I'm doing 1.5 times the recipe. Okay, so this is going to go back into our 400-degree oven now for about 20 minutes. I'll then let it sit and cool for somewhere around 20-25 minutes, and then we'll be ready to eat. Okay, so I've just pulled it out of the oven, so we're going to let it cool for a little bit because it's piping hot, and then we'll portion it up. Alright, so there's the finished product, and we're dishing it up, and Kayla is eating hers. Yum! You say bye-bye.